us now is Erin Murphy of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. to talk to us about the negotiations happening now over in that state between the Philippines and the U.S. So good to have you with us, Erin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so our Philippine government negotiators are there right now to discuss the negotiations, tariff negotiations. What do you think might be a positive outcome from the negotiations?
Sure. There are a lot of governments that are currently in Washington, D.C., and Asia is definitely leading the pack. We have India, Japan, South Korea, and of course the Philippines. And I think for the Philippines, they have a good story to tell. This is a long relationship with the United States. There is a good story to tell about U.S. investment in the Philippines, but also how the Philippines plays a role in key sectors that are important for U.S. economic growth and development. So how these trade negotiations are going, it seems to be a lot of conversations, steps toward a framework, and eventually whether it's a free trade agreement or something more formal like that remains to be seen. But I think that the Philippines has quite a few levers to pull on this to try to help lower tariffs. Again, they have one of the lowest in the region, so that's a good sign, I guess you could say. But certainly they'll be very busy here in Washington talking about what the relationship means.
Right, there is a good story to tell, as you say, and a lot of different levers. I know that you've been to the Philippines, to Manila, in fact, last October, and it was your first time here. What are your insights for you to be able to say that there are levers in the way that you'd want to harness private capital and public investments?
Certainly. CSIS, the Washington, D.C. based think tank, released a report looking at the U.S.-Philippine investment relationship. And part of the title was More Than Meets the Eye. When you look at some of the numbers, it really doesn't tell the whole story of how the engagement is, where the Philippines has really contributed, as I was mentioning, to critical sectors for U.S. economic growth, but also for growth for the region and the country itself. That includes semiconductors, energy, garments and apparel, and other types of sectors as well that really are going to pull Philippines up the value chain, but also continue to contribute to where America's goals are. Donald Trump himself has said that semiconductors, manufacturing, and AI are all important for the United States, and the Philippines has a significant role to play. Other things that we found both in this report and also during my trip here is that there still are steps that need to be taken. And certainly if the Philippines is also considering membership in CPTPP, these are all efforts that are going to get the Philippines right where they need to be, which includes having a better enabling environment for investment, but also having a better tracking system and more transparent data sets so that the Filipinos can also understand what the United States is doing in the country.
And we haven't even talked about the Philippines being a defense treaty partner with the U.S. and the other partner is Japan. I mean, how can and should the Philippines leverage this relationship on top of the U.S. being the Philippines' biggest trading partner?
Certainly, it is really one of the biggest parts of the story. I mean, the relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines is an incredibly long one, and it holds the status of being one of 5 U.S. treaty allies in the region, Japan and South Korea, as you mentioned, being the others. And they're all in a similar trade negotiation with a country, which, I think probably boggles the mind for some, saying, why are we in this position? And I think that kind of reflects a little bit of how Trump himself sees views with other countries, that it is somewhat transactional, but it's also quite siloed. And I think that for those of us in Washington that are looking at the tariff negotiations, but are looking at U.S. foreign policy writ large, is trying to push an idea that there's a holistic relationship there, that there is more than meets the eye. And certainly that defense engagement and the defense treaty is incredibly important to the United States. It also provides a market for U.S. defense material, whether it's for F-16s or a missile system, which is really important for U.S. industries, but also for Filipino defense.
True, and that could have a favorable impact on the trade balance, just talking about those big defense equipment. On to the Development Finance Corporation. There are plans, as I understand, of setting up an office in Manila. How's that coming along so far?
Yes, that was announced mid-year last year, and as you can probably tell from the news, the U.S. is going through a bit of a transition with its own government resources and really taking a look at where it needs to put resources, where it needs to cut resources. I think that the big story here is that U.S. agencies and departments are being cut all over the place. We'll see what happens with the Development Finance Corporation, but I know that there's a general appreciation for what the DFC does, that it does get to the U.S. bottom line of investments and engagement. The DFC has been really critical and has bipartisan support for what it's been doing. And certainly opening an office in Manila will help build that relationship even further, including investments in sectors that we were just discussing that are important to the American economy and not just the Filipino economy. So I think that the U.S. has to go through this discussion about where is the size of the U.S. government heading, where are the resources, and whether Manila is where they should be. But I'm pretty optimistic. I don't say that often, but I'm optimistic that this will be a place and that hopefully this year, I don't want to make any promises, that we'll see a DFC office in Manila.
All right. Well, we're with you in that transition. Thank you so much, Erin, for your views. I much appreciate it. Erin Murphy of the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C.